The following contractor safety orientation presentation is not an attempt to reiterate OSHA regulations or to provide the contract firm OSHA mandated safety training. It is intended to highlight general safety rules and clarify Gerdau's contractor safety policies and procedures. The objective of the Gerdau Contractor Safety Policy is to create a foundation for a healthy and safe work environment for contractors, our employees, and the general public. This will be achieved by compliance with state, federal, and provincial regulations, as well as adherence to our Contractor Safety Policy. This policy applies to all contractors and subcontractors performing work on any Gerdau property. It is each contractor and subcontractor employee's responsibility to comply with this policy at all times while conducting activities for Gerdau. Contractors and all subcontractors must be approved through the Gerdau Contractor Approval System prior to any work occurring on site. Your employer, as an approved contractor of Gerdau, agreed to comply with our Contractor Safety Policy, as well as follow all the laws and regulations of the applicable state, federal, and provincial agencies. It is your employer's responsibility to be aware of and inform you of all hazards associated with the work and how to protect yourself from those hazards. It is also their responsibility to train you annually. Your employer is responsible for supplying you with all personal protective equipment, including footwear, blue hard hats with chin straps, safety glasses, and safety locks. You must attend Gerdau's Contractor Safety Orientation to learn and explain all the rules and policies. Your responsibility as a contractor's employee is to attend this orientation meeting prior to starting work. Your employer will also give you ongoing safety training with daily toolbox meetings at the beginning of each shift and weekly safety meetings. You are expected to report to work physically able to perform your job. You must perform all your work according to Gerdau guidelines, those guidelines required by your employer, and applicable governmental laws and regulations. A valid mobile equipment operating certification is required for each equipment used on site and must be submitted to your Gerdau contact before starting work. The certification must be valid within the last 3 years. For everyone's protection, maintain a safety awareness attitude while performing your work. All employees working on the project must participate in completing a preliminary risk assessment or PRA and associated permits for the project. The PRA is used to fully evaluate the project's specific hazards and to identify and implement controls via the required permits to conduct the day's activities in a safe manner. The PRA and work permits must remain posted on the job site. During the hazard identification process, consider the tasks people will be performing and whether these tasks could impact others. Do the following hazards exist? Traffic hazards. Look up, down, 360 around to identify pedestrian hazards or risk to others. Pedestrian safety is a key focus for Gerdau. Contractors are required to remain within the designated walkways whenever walking within a Gerdau facility. Equipment hazards. Is the equipment in good working order, compliant to Gerdau standards, and are all operators properly trained? Energy hazards, including electricity, pneumatic, hydraulic, gravity, steam heat, springs, and fuel. Chemical hazards, confined space hazards, fire hazards, and fall hazards. We next review the specific PPE requirements for the task. Blue hard hat with chin strap. Electrician's gloves. Safety boots. The styles may be specific. Check with the facility for their requirements. Sealed eyewear. Shirt sleeves. Arm protection. Flame-resistant clothing. Burn goggles. Welding eye protection. Face shield or grinding hazards. Leg protection. Work gloves. Fall protection arrest system, including fall harness and lanyard. Dust mask and respirator. The PRA is next reviewed by the contractor and Gerdau persons in charge. Everyone understands their safe work requirements. Everyone knows what to do. Everyone has PPE required. Is it used? Right tools available and secure. Permits issued as necessary. The area is isolated and properly marked. Attention person responsible. Ensure training and signature of all participants. Ensure monitoring implementation of service. Stop and ask for help if you have any questions for safe work procedures. Based on the above information, we can now complete the specifics for the PRA. We list the steps for each task individually. Next, for each step, we list its specific hazard or hazards and determine if a work permit is required for the hazard. We identify other actions to control the hazard and then determine who is responsible for the control. Implementation of the control must be documented before proceeding. The PRA is completed, reviewed, reissued daily, and signed by all parties involved, including contractors, subcontractors, and Gerdau employees. Examples of permits potentially required are chemical permit for hazardous chemicals, confined space entry permit, electrical non-routine, excavation permit, work at heights permit, hot work permit, scaffolding, mobile crane or heavy lift permit, and radiation permit. The purpose of this process is to ensure that everyone understands the risks inherent in the job and have planned adequate safeguards to avoid accidents and injury before any work takes place. This requires communication among all parties on the job, especially the Gerdau and contractor project managers. Gerdau feels so strongly about the importance of certain policies in keeping you safe that they have designated those as cardinal safety rules. There is zero tolerance for serious and/or intentional violations of our cardinal safety rules. Violation of a cardinal safety rule will result in the immediate removal of the contractor employee. Project engineer or project coordinator and location safety manager will determine appropriate sanctions to include one of the following: warning letter, notice of suspension, company probation, company suspension, company barring. Cardinal safety rules include lockout-tryout for failure to follow lockout-tryout procedures, fall protection for failure to use adequate fall protection or fall prevention measures, material handling for failure to operate equipment in a safe manner, being trained and authorized, rail safety for failure to follow rail safety procedures, stopping for locomotives, and violating the red zone. Confined space for failure to follow confined space procedures. Safety devices for failure to follow lockout, tagout, tryout for defeating, ignoring, or rendering inoperable safety devices. General safety rules include follow all standards, instructions, signs, warnings, and rules. Always ask if you are unsure if something is unsafe. Only trained and authorized employees may operate equipment or enter restricted areas. Only perform tasks after all risks have been adequately evaluated and controlled. Lock out and try out all power sources before working on machines or equipment. Do not defeat safety devices and maintain them in operating condition. Always maintain a safe distance from suspended loads, lifting devices, and hooks. Follow the designated pathways while walking through facilities. Always keep your hands away from machinery and equipment where your hands or other parts of your body can get caught. Always use the personal protective equipment required for the task and ensure all are maintained in proper condition without compromise. Communicate immediately all accidents, near misses, substandard acts, and substandard conditions. Additional general rules. Personnel may not work for more than 16 consecutive hours. Personnel must have at least 8 hours of rest time between when the contractor stops working and when they report for the next shift. Personnel may not utilize cell phones, music devices, etc. while operating equipment, in work areas, while walking, or any other time that their use could be a distraction and compromise their safety or the safety of another. Personnel must be medically fit for duty when arriving on site. Never enter areas outside of your designated approved work area. Remain in your work area. Taking pictures or videos is not permitted without Gerdau's permission. Maintenance on contractor vehicles while on Gerdau property is outside of the SOW and not permitted. Scrapyard and slag operations areas are off-limits unless escorted by your Gerdau contact. Never work alone. Unless you have been authorized by your Gerdau site contact, do not make any connection to operating electrical, gas, oxygen, water, pneumatic, hydraulic, or process lines. Do not turn on or off any of these utility lines. Gerdau has a lockout, tagout, tryout policy to protect you from the accidental startup of machinery. After the completion of the daily project safety review, all contractors and subcontractors must proceed to the affected area to complete the necessary equipment lockouts using the Gerdau-provided lockout-tryout procedure. All contractor employees are required to participate in this process, and each must individually apply their lock or locks to the equipment or group lockbox. Always review the control of kinetic energy in motion and potential energy stored with your Gerdau representatives. Anytime you must place your head, hand, or any other part of your body in a position where you are at risk of being injured by moving or energized equipment, or any time you are required to remove or bypass a guard or other safety devices, you must contact your Gerdau representative to coordinate the lockout, tagout, tryout procedure. This procedure is designed to make sure every source of energy has been disabled, that every employee applies his lock, and that it cannot be re-energized until every employee involved unlocks it. Each lock must be standardized by the contractor and contain a label or tag identifying the contractor firm name and employee's name who applied the lock. Contractors are not authorized to shut down, stop, or de-energize any plant equipment or machinery. A qualified Gerdau employee must do this unless an imminent danger situation exists. If you see someone's lock on a piece of equipment, leave it alone. That person is the only one allowed to remove that lock. You must receive formal training and certification on lockout, tagout, tryout before participating in this program. This training is provided by your employer. Do not leave the site with your lock still in place. This could cause tremendous inconvenience for your company and Gerdau if we had to track you down to start up the machine. It is Gerdau's policy that you wear fall protection equipment whenever you climb 4 feet above the ground, unless the area is surrounded by a permanent stationary deck with properly equipped guardrails, or work in a man lift or scissor lift, or anytime you work off a ladder over 4 feet above the ground and you are not able to maintain a 3-point contact, or when you work over 4 feet deep pits or basement openings. Acceptable fall protection includes a full body harness and shock-absorbing lanyards or self-retracting lifelines, which are referred to as SRLs. The lanyards must be tied off to a structure capable of supporting 5,000 pounds for each person attached. 100% tie-off is mandatory. You may be required to wear a dual lanyard. Fall protection belts may be used for fall restraint. The use of forklifts as man lifts is strictly forbidden unless properly fitted with an approved engineered man basket. Contractor personnel must receive adequate training before working at heights. Gerdau does not provide either the equipment or the training for implementing any contractor's work at heights program that may be required to perform the contracted work. Both are the sole responsibility of the contractor. You must be adequately trained and receive certification to use mobile equipment. Inspect and document your fork truck safety devices and all operational systems prior to use each shift. You must be trained and qualified to operate a crane by your employer. Do not stand or walk under loads suspended from cranes or the empty hook of a crane. Listen for the siren, horn, bell, or other signaling devices that signal the approach of a crane. Keep all parts of the body in the clear of lifts while tension is being applied. All cranes used on site must be inspected regularly, including daily operator pre-use inspections and annual inspections. The crane must be certified to operate. All rigging equipment must have permanently affixed identification from the manufacturer and be inspected prior to each use. You must be both trained and authorized by your employer in safe rigging practices. Safe rigging practices shall be adhered to at all times. Always be certain of the weight of the load, prior to performing any lifting operations. You must be adequately trained to use a boom lift or scissor lift. You must be tied off to the floor or mid-rail anchor point while wearing a self-retractable lanyard before performing work. You must lock out the bay if there is potential contact with the crane, hot rails, or below the hook's devices. Inspect and document your aerial equipment safety devices and all operational systems prior to use each shift. Use of an aerial lift at a Gerdau facility requires a spotter to escort the lift during movement. The spotter must always be visible to the equipment operator and provide assistance with clearances and pedestrians that may be in the equipment's path. When the aerial lift is stationary, the area below must be marked with cones and/or caution tape to prevent pedestrians from traveling under the work area. Aerial lifts can be used directly over pedestrian pathways, provided the necessary precautions are taken to close off the walkway and provide a temporary, safe pedestrian route. Riding on locomotives, rail cars, or other transportation equipment is prohibited except when required by your job. Do not crawl or climb over or under cars. Only drive across railroads at the crossings provided for that purpose, and only after coming to a complete stop. Always park vehicles or equipment a minimum distance of 10 feet out from the center line of any railroad track. Only walk across railroad at designated walkways. When crossing a track with standing cars, maintain a minimum of 25 feet clearance from the end of the car in case of sudden movement. Contractor employees will not defeat, remove, ignore, or render inoperative a safety device or guards on machinery, equipment, or tools. Contractors cannot perform any work for Gerdau unless a PRA and associated permits have been completed. All employees working on the project must review and sign the PRA. Then it must remain with the persons conducting the work. If work task hazards or scope change, stop work and meet with your Gerdau contact to update and discuss with the crew. Completing the PRA and associated permits require a thorough analysis of all of the hazards inherent in the job at hand. The contractor is asked to identify any hazards that may become present, including exposed electricity, excavations, toxic substances, and poisonous atmospheres. The pre-task safety checklist section requires an evaluation of your need for protective equipment such as gloves, face shields, and safety locks. Work is not authorized until the PRA is completed and signed. Associated permits such as confined space entry, energized work, hot work, excavation, etc. may also be required depending on the scope of your project and as determined when completing the preliminary risk assessment. Anyone working on Gerdau property must not be under the influence of or in possession of illegal drugs or alcohol. Your company may have its own testing program to include random or annual testing. Any contractor who refuses to submit to a drug and alcohol test or who tests positive for drugs and/or alcohol will be removed from work at any of our sites. No weapons of any kind are to be brought onto Gerdau property. If you are involved in or observe an accident, injury, or even a near-miss incident, you are required to report it immediately to your supervisor and the Gerdau representative. Also, report any hazardous conditions you encounter during the course of your work. You must report all injuries to our representative, no matter how slight. Do not use any Gerdau equipment. If our equipment is required, we will provide an operator, or the contractor company must complete and meet the Equipment Hold Harmless Agreement. Where there is danger from moving machinery or equipment, proper protective devices such as flags, signs, signal lights, derails, rail clamps, or watchmen shall be provided. All contractors must wear ANSI-approved hard hats at all times in designated hard hat areas. They must be blue hard hats with chin straps. You must wear safety glasses with side shields at all times. Wear a face shield if you are performing any grinding, chipping, burning, spray washing, or similar tasks. Use only those welding hoods that attach to the hard hat or are usable while wearing a hard hat. Anytime you are working on our property, you must wear protective safety steel-toed boots that come above the ankle. Specific hazards may necessitate special protective footwear such as rubber boots or boots with metatarsal guards. You are required to wear gloves around any operation that presents a hazard to your hands. You must wear special hand protection when working near chemicals or high-voltage equipment, and at other times when safety conditions call for such protection. Long pants and long-sleeved shirts are required when working on site. Your clothing must be in good repair and conform to the requirements of the working area. Flame-retardant clothing must be worn when in the mill. Don't wear oil-soaked or grease-covered clothing. If you are working around open flames or molten metals, don't wear nylon, polyester, or other synthetic materials, even as undergarments. You may be required to wear respiratory protection whenever the occupational exposure limit is exceeded. Before you put on a respirator, you must have medical approval and fit testing. You are not permitted to wear jewelry, including rings, chain bracelets, or necklaces. And in case of emergency or ice hard hat sticker and hard hat insert should be worn instead of a medical alert bracelet. In the United States, if you are going to be working around live, high-voltage circuits, your flash protection must conform to the NFPA 70E standard. If in Canada, please refer to your Ministry of Labor guidelines for your province. Depending on where you are working on plant property, hearing protection may be required. Signs have been posted in high-noise areas to warn you to wear hearing protection. You must also wear hearing protection whenever equipment such as jackhammers, pneumatic wrenches, and saws generate noise levels exceeding 85 decibels. You must wear hearing protection in the form of moldable earplugs or adjustable earmuffs in any of these high-noise areas. Ask your supervisor for hearing protection if none is immediately available. Enter Gerdau property only through the designated gate. Park personal vehicles in designated parking areas only. Parking of personal vehicles on streets and in or around buildings is prohibited. You must sign in and out with security or designated point of entry each time. All contractor vehicles entering or exiting our property may be subject to search. Obey the posted speed limit and traffic signs. Heavy mobile equipment and material haulers are constantly on the move and have right-of-way. Pedestrians are constantly crossing the roadways. Remain alert. Proper housekeeping is one of the key elements for a safe and healthy workplace. Substandard housekeeping also indicates a lack of job pride and performance. Store all materials in an orderly fashion in the designated areas where the work is to be performed. Clean all spills immediately and report all spills to your Gerdau representative. Store all tools and other equipment in proper locations when they are not in use. Contractors are required to provide their own tools required for the scope of work. Any deviations from this requires the permission of Gerdau site personnel, and in the case of Gerdau mobile equipment, the Hold Harmless Agreement must be in place. Keep stairs, steps, ladders, and walkways clean and free of materials that might cause tripping or slipping. Contractors are solely responsible for properly disposing of all waste generated by them on a daily basis. Make sure that all your electrical equipment is properly grounded and in good repair. Use ground fault circuit interrupts with all portable electric tools. Trigger locks on portable electric tools are not allowed. Worn, frayed, or spliced electrical cords or cables must be removed from service. The contractor is required to become familiar with any piping he may be working around to ensure proper identification of such piping. If the contractor is unsure of piping, naming of pipes, or color coding, he must obtain classification of said piping before performing any work. Become familiar with the locations and use of portable fire extinguishers located in your work area. Each company vehicle and all powered equipment must be equipped with appropriate fire extinguishing equipment. Notify our safety department if you must take any firefighting system out of service. If you have received fire extinguisher training and feel comfortable doing so, attempt to extinguish a small fire with a fire extinguisher. Report the incident to your site contact, the department supervisor, or any member of our management team. In case of a large fire, warn personnel in the area to evacuate the area, then contact the on-site emergency contact. Keep all flammable refuse in proper containers. Store flammable liquids in fireproof containers. Properly secure all compressed gases cylinders. Before using a cutting torch or welding, complete a hot work permit and have it signed off by your site contact. Obtain permission from your site contact before using any temporary heating devices. For safety, several areas in our plants have been designated no smoking areas. Ashtrays or sand pails are provided in areas where smoking is permitted. Smoking materials shall not be thrown on the ground or floor of the work area or anywhere on site. Do not use or carry matches, propane or butane lighters on your person in PPE-required areas. Never attempt to use a cutting or welding torch as a lighter. Contractors performing work at our plant must provide a complete list of all substances or chemicals they will bring onto plant property. Contractors must maintain SDS sheets on site for any chemicals and materials they will use on site. Contractors must provide our representative an SDS before any hazardous substance may be brought onto the site. Properly label and identify all containers